Walk us through the Migos case. Tell us what happened.
Sure. So I guess 5 years ago, I was out of town, and I got a phone call and that was a different part of the Migos trajectory at that point. I guess they were, I'm gonna act like I know what I'm talking about, they were famous for Versace. And although I will tell you, my wife has tried to drag me into Versace's and say back then, you gotta tell them, you know the Versace people.
Like, no, sweetie, come on, let's go.
We're not going in there.
No.
We're not going in, as if I was gonna get a discount. And so they went and did a concert at a college called Georgia Southern University, and it was one of the like senior student invites. So they were actually invited by the students. It came out of the students' funds. Students paid for them to come there, and it's in South Georgia. They never should have gone. Because to get into that courthouse, you literally had to walk past the statue of the Confederate soldier, all right? And there's no doubt there's a lot of white robes circulating around that community, and law enforcement was literally lying in wait for them. So when they got there, they no sooner left than they went charging into their vehicles. I call them church buses. They went charging in because back then they didn't have the fancy Mercedes Sprinters. And they had security people that had guns. There were people that were licensed, but they just assumed everybody had them. They found some marijuana, and they just prosecuted everybody. Because Kiari Cephas, who was offset, had a criminal record, it took 9 months to get him out. One of the hearings that stands out is in our third attempt to get him out. We flew in an executive from New York, a iconic music executive. And while he was there, Offset's lovely mother, and her colleagues are here actually, we're colleagues here, was testifying, and the judge, who was Caucasian, stopped her. Ma'am, stop for a second. I just want to point out, you are very articulate. And so I'm just like, wow, man, this is crazy. And so of course, the judge was at the end, after talking to how articulate he was, said, but I'm going to keep you in jail for a little longer. And so they wrote about it, by the way, in the local paper a couple days later. But they didn't talk about it like the New York Times would, or the Washington Post, or any paper would be, like how disgusting it was. But they made a point of the fact that, wow, even the judge noticed how articulate this woman was. And so the executive and I are driving away, and he says to me, dude, did that judge stop the hearing to basically say, hey, check out the black woman, she's articulate? And so that's the environment that he went through. And the bar of justice, one side was all white, that was the court personnel, the lawyers, the judge, and the other side was not only us, but everybody in this county, in South Georgia, that was of color, that was being prosecuted. And the statistics are unbearable. And I should say that is what prompted me on a personal level to start taking trips throughout the southern part of the United States in poor jurisdictions, trying to examine the kind of representation that poor folks are getting in Mississippi and Alabama and beyond. Because if Migos, even at that stage, with big record labels, making sure they have the best lawyers around, can get treated like that, what are poor folks getting treated like?
Before we get to some of your questions, what ultimately worked in your client's favor?
The amazing thing was we put a ton of work into the case. The original charges against him were all dismissed. The only charge that he entered a plea of guilty to, because there was a video recording of it, as him being tormented by a white inmate and having a fight with that inmate. He had to enter a plea to that fight, which was all caught on video. But the reason he sat in there for 9 months, ultimately, which he was innocent of, was all dismissed. So you had to keep him in there for 9 months, make him lose his mind, being caged like an animal, to the point where finally some white hillbilly redneck tormented him enough that he got in a fight with him. For that to be something he had to enter a plea to get out of jail, which of course we know is, with anybody concerned about cash bails, is epidemic in our country, where people just enter guilty pleas to get themselves out of jail and then have to deal with the collateral consequences of convictions for the rest of their lives.